You know, when we hear the word Masons, we tend to think of secret handshakes, deep philosophical debates, and this kind of global brotherhood. But that modern image, it actually hides a much deeper and, frankly, more surprising origin story. One that's rooted not in Enlightenment philosophy, but in the stone, sweat, and faith of medieval Europe. So let's get into it and uncover the real history of the original operative Masons.
To get started, I want you to think about a fundamental question. If you were to ask someone today, they'd probably say, what, the square, the compass, maybe a gavel? Those are the symbols we all recognize. But for the original Masons, the actual guys who built the great cathedrals of Europe, the answer was something else entirely.
And there it is, their most essential tool. The one that guided everything else was their unwavering Catholic faith. Now, this isn't just some quaint historical detail. It is the absolute bedrock of their entire identity and their work ethic. Everything they built and the way they built it flowed directly from this deep theological foundation.
So, that raises a question, right? How did physical work, getting your hands dirty, become so deeply intertwined with faith? Well, to really understand the Masons, we have to first understand a pretty revolutionary shift in how Western society looked at the very act of labor itself.
What's so fascinating here is just how stark the contrast is. In the classical world, Greece and Rome, manual labor was seen as degrading. It was something for slaves to do, not for free citizens. But Christian theology, especially through the monastic traditions, completely flipped that idea on its head. Suddenly, labor became honorable. It became a sacred duty.
And this whole transformation was beautifully captured in the famous motto of St. Benedict, ora et labora, or pray and work. All of a sudden, physical work wasn't seen as the curse from Adam's fall from grace anymore. Instead, it was an extension of prayer itself. It was a form of spiritual discipline, a way to actually participate in God's creative work here on earth. It was a path to salvation.
And this wasn't just a spiritual concept, it became a serious intellectual one. Thinkers at the time gave the practical arts, like building, a place of real respect. They called it ars mechanica, the mechanical arts, and they saw it as a totally valid way of understanding and reflecting the divine order of the universe. So building a cathedral was, in a very real sense, theology made manifest in stone.
And this profound theological shift is what gave rise to the very men who would put these ideas into practice. It created this unique and elite class of craftsmen, the operative Masons.
Now, these were not your average local tradesmen. Operative Masons were a truly elite group. They were mobile, traveling from one massive cathedral project to the next. They held secret technical knowledge, the sacred geometry you needed to build these incredible structures. And, this is crucial, they operated under the direct spiritual protection of the church. They answered to God and their lodge master, not some local feudal lord.
Their internal structure was incredibly rigid and hierarchical. An apprentice wasn't just learning how to cut stone, he was being taught a strict moral code. As a journeyman, he would travel, perfecting his skills, and then finally, as a master, he would lead these huge projects and take on the sacred responsibility of passing down the knowledge to the next generation. The whole point was to shape the man, not just the stone.
And this is where you can really see the fusion of their craft and their faith. The very tools they held in their hands every single day were soaked in deep moral symbolism. The square wasn't just for making a perfect right angle, it was a constant reminder to live an honest, upright life. The compass taught balance, and the chisel represented the discipline needed to chip away at your own imperfections.
This moral code wasn't just some informal understanding either. It was all written down, codified in a series of legal and ethical documents that governed every single aspect of their lives, from what they did on the worksite to how they behaved at home. Our main window into their world comes from this amazing collection of over 130 manuscripts. We know them today as the Old Charges, and these documents laid out all the rules, the regulations, and even a kind of mythical history of the craft that connected them all the way back to ancient times.
The oldest one of these that we have, the Regius Manuscript from around 1390, gives us the clearest picture. It lays out a complete moral system. The absolute, non-negotiable foundation was loyalty to God and the Catholic Church. From there, it demanded total professional honesty. No shoddy work, no cutting corners, no stealing materials. And this extended to a really strict personal morality, all enforced by total obedience to the masters of the lodge.
So for centuries, this system of faith and craft worked in almost perfect harmony. But as the great age of cathedral building started to slow down, and with all the religious chaos of the Reformation, powerful new forces began to pull this ancient craft in a totally new direction, and it led to a profound and really an irreversible transformation. The year 1598 is a huge turning point. In Scotland, the Shaw Statutes were put in place to standardize the craft. But with work slowing down, the lodges needed new life, and, let's be honest, new patrons. So, the statutes included this fascinating little provision. They formally allowed men who were not working stonemasons, these gentlemen masons, to be accepted. These were aristocrats, intellectuals, people who were drawn more to the symbolism and philosophy than the actual physical labor.
This timeline really shows you how the shift happened and how quickly it accelerated. We start back in 1390 with a purely Catholic, working craft. By 1598, the door just creaks open for outsiders. And then, 1717, a huge moment. The Grand Lodge of London is founded. This is the official birth of modern speculative masonry, which is a purely philosophical society. And then, just 2 decades later, you have the final break, a papal ban condemning this new organization.
So what happened? Why did this evolution lead to such a dramatic and complete schism? Well, the answer lies in a fundamental change in the very soul of the organization itself.
Just look at this comparison. It lays out the differences, and they are truly irreconcilable. Theologically, operative masonry was exclusively Roman Catholic. Speculative masonry, on the other hand, became deist and universalists. The primary goal shifted from building physical cathedrals for the glory of God to building a philosophical system of morality for all of humanity. And secrecy, which once protected vital trade secrets, now is used to guard symbolic rituals.
At the very heart of this theological shift was this new concept, the great architect of the universe. Now, this is a deist idea, a belief in a creator God who kind of sets the universe in motion but doesn't really intervene. And it was a very deliberate move away from the specific doctrines of the Catholic Church. By referring to a generic creator, the new speculative lodges could welcome men of different faiths and forbid any discussion of specific religious dogma within the lodge.
Well, from the Catholic Church's perspective, this was not a step toward tolerance. It was a move toward religious indifference, or what you might call relativism. The condemnation in 1738 wasn't aimed at the old guilds of builders. It was aimed squarely at this new, secretive philosophical society, which, in the Church's view, promoted the idea that one religion was just as good as another, and that undermined the unique truth of Christianity itself.
So we end up right back where we started, but with a completely new perspective. The story of the Masons is this incredible journey from a deeply Catholic craft guild, where your work was literally a form of worship, to a global philosophical fraternity. And it leaves us with a really compelling question for our own time. In our largely secular world, what is the connection between the work we do with our hands and the beliefs that we hold in our hearts?